I'm going to subtract these two rational expressions. And in order to subtract fractions in general, you need to make sure you have a common denominator. Clearly, these denominators are not the same. So what I'm going to have to do is find one. You need to get in the habit of just immediately factoring. But since I want a common denominator, you don't have to worry about factoring any numerators. In fact, I encourage you not to factor the numerators. I think that will just mess you up even more. Just factor the denominators because your goal right now is to find a common denominator. So I have a difference of squares, x squared minus 4. The square root of x squared is x. The square root of 4 is 2. So using opposite signs, this would factor to x plus 2, x minus 2. So if I want a common denominator, I want to choose one that I can turn both of them into. So if one of them is x plus 2, x minus 2, and the other one is just x plus 2, if you look at that second denominator, the only thing it's missing is the x minus 2. If it had an x minus 2, it would match. So why not multiply an x minus 2 into that denominator, and now I have a common denominator. However, if you remember how normal fractions work, whatever you do to the denominator, you must also do to the numerator. That's what you do when you're finding a common denominator with just regular old fractions. So what you have to do is then multiply the numerator also by x minus 2. So this one is going to require a lot of calculations and a lot of simplifying, just so you know. So now that they have the same denominator, I'm going to go ahead and write one huge expression with the common denominator, x plus 2, x minus 2. If you recall from normal fractions, once you have a common denominator, you just combine the numerators. So what I'm going to do is rewrite the numerators, but I'm just going to put them together this time since I have the same denominator. That first fraction or first expression, I did not change. The denominator stayed the same. It looks different because I factored it, but I didn't put anything in there that wasn't there before. So the numerator is still 2x squared minus 16. That does not change. The second one, however, you need to be very careful. I'm subtracting this second denominator, which is x plus 4 times x minus 2. So when I write it, I need to put the x plus 4 in parentheses so that I know to multiply both terms by x minus 2, but I'm also putting them in parentheses to indicate that that negative sign is going to be distributed to everything. So when you have a problem like this, I highly suggest you FOIL first and you don't worry about the minus sign just yet. So what I'm going to do now is multiply x plus 4 times x minus 2. So FOILing, x times x is x squared, x times negative 2 is negative 2x, 4 times x is positive 4x, 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. So combining those middle terms, negative 2x and positive 4x, you end up with x squared plus 2x minus 8. Now remember, this is what I have in that second numerator, but the second numerator is being subtracted. So when I write it, I'm keeping it in parentheses and I have that minus sign in front. So the very next thing that I'm going to have to do if I'm going to keep simplifying these numerators is distribute the negative sign. It is so important that you do that. So I've distributed the negative, and we get negative x squared minus 2x plus 8. The signs just change. So we are almost to the end. All I'm doing is cleaning up these numerators, combining like terms. That's what I'm going to do next. I have a 2x squared and a negative x squared. Those are like terms. The minus 2x is on its own, and the negative 16 plus 8 can be combined. So there's my work. We end up with x squared minus 2x minus 8. Now, if you are getting used to rational expressions and you've seen the steps to simplifying rational expressions, hopefully you understand that when you are writing your final answer here, you need to check that it is completely simplified. So the way to simplify rational expressions is to keep factoring until you can no longer factor and you can no longer cancel anything out. So you need to check your numerator, x squared minus 2x minus 8. If it's factorable, go ahead and factor it. If it has common factors with the denominator, go ahead and cross those out. So if you check, you're finding two numbers that multiply to -8 and add to -2. There are two numbers that do that. Those two numbers are -4 and +2. So I'm actually not done with this problem because I am now factoring that numerator. Like I said, -4 and +2. Now that it's in factored form, you can see that there's an x plus 2 in both the numerator and the denominator. So if you've learned anything about rational expressions, you know that those can actually be canceled out. And we would be left with x minus 4 over x minus 2. That would be the final answer. You cannot cross out those x's because the x in the numerator has to stay with the -4, and the x in the denominator has to stay with the -2. You can only cross things out when they've been multiplied. So in factored form, the x minus 4 is being multiplied by x plus 2. And in the denominator, the x plus 2 is being multiplied by the x minus 2. So I can cross out those factors, but the final answer is x minus 4 over x minus 2. One more thing I want to point out, I actually forgot to do this in my last video. I forgot to answer the second part of the question, which is to identify any x values for which the expression is undefined. Once you have your common denominator, you can do this. Undefined means that the denominator is equal to 0. So we're taking our common denominator, which is x plus 2, x minus 1, and setting it equal to 0 and finding those x values. So it would be undefined at -2 and +2. When you set your common denominator equal to 0, you're solving x plus 2 equals 0 and x minus 2 equals 0, which tells you that this is undefined at -2 and +2. I know that's a long problem. I suggest rewatching it, pausing it at times, writing stuff down. These problems where you're adding and subtracting can be very lengthy, and it's very important that you are doing it slowly, step by step, and writing down your work so you can keep track of what you're doing.